And it says we're live. I'm going to believe the internet. I'm going to believe that. Oh my gosh, we're already being invaded by the savage wolves. Because we're here to talk about Wolf Man, not Wolfman, but Wolf Man. The dichotomous title
Wolf
for a
man.
dichotomous movie. It seems to be splitting people, not necessarily in a good way. Leigh Whannell's latest feature hit theaters last weekend, and yeah, it's not doing very well critically, and the audiences seem to be kind of like, I don't know what to make of this, and I don't know what our panel makes of this either necessarily. So we're gonna have a fun conversation tonight about the latest modern twist on a horror classic. And who are we? We are Earth's Mightiest Critics. We're three of us. I am Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. We have Mark the Movie Man Krawcheck of the Spoiler Room, and Katie Glidewell, the blonde in front, back with us tonight. So it's interesting because Leigh Whannell has been here before. I think also with Blumhouse. Wasn't The Invisible Man from a
Mhm.
few years ago? That was a Blumhouse production.
Yep.
2020. Wow, it seems like so far it was half a decade ago. And that starred Elizabeth Moss in a take on The Invisible Man that I think got a lot of people excited, including myself. So when I found out he was doing a new version of Wolfman, I was like, werewolf movies have never really done it for me. There are a few that kind of stand out, but for the most part, I'm like, yeah, it's a guy who turns into a dog. What's the hook? So this latest version also stars Christopher Abbott, an actor that a lot of people are really excited about, and I never really got it. I never got the Christopher Abbott thing, possibly because of the roles, possibly because when I watch him, I feel like I'm looking at a bowl of oatmeal with like two raisins in it. But anyhow, he's in this movie, and I thought he was pretty great, and all
Wow.
around, yeah. And I think overall, I think this movie was it surprised me. I was really into Wolfman. And I know that's not a popular opinion, so let's have it out, gang. What do we think of Wolfman? Are we gonna howl in praise, or are we gonna give this film the full moon?
Well, let you and Katie talk. I'll be out of here then.
No, Mark. I want to have this conversation because I know it's this movie, as I mentioned, it's like 50%, I think, audiences and critics. It's right around there, so it's a split. And yeah, I want to talk about it. I want to have that conversation. So, Mark, I think we know how you feel based on that reaction. Katie, what do you make of Wolfman? Are you gonna be the tiebreaker, or am I gonna be going 2-1 on this?
No, it's 2-1. I with siding with you, Ian. I do not hear. Well, here's the thing. I do not think Wolfman is bad. I'm
Okay.
not praising it. It's like, I mean, according to you, do I give it? Do I give Christopher Abbott now 7 raisins? Yes, maybe even more. Maybe a dozen raisins for this performance. Definitely more than 2 in that oatmeal. But it was fine. I mean, it's January. Is this the month that we are where they kind of like throw films away and it's like, you got, very low expectations? Yes. So with that high, momentum going into it, I mean, it's better than most January horror films. I mean, I look at last year with Night Swim. Is this better than that? Yes. Do I think it could have been a lot better? Yes. Do I like the performances. I like the cast. I like the different aspects regarding the virus like infiltrating the person. And I know Leigh Whannell was inspired by Cronenberg's The Fly. I can see that. I do wish that this film went a longer. It seems like the majority of where we're supposed to be really in the meat of it is like encompasses maybe 12 hours, and I honestly wish it went longer. I think
Mm.
there's some parts of it that are absolutely ridiculous. I think it's Mark and I have discussed this. I think Leigh Whannell is doing a different take on monsters and making them more like what real life monsters are. Like with The Invisible Man, it's about a narcissist and gaslighting and abuse, and with someone that you love. That's that unconditional love, and that is a monster. With this, it's more of the family dynamic, and then you have a monster that, you know, that's turning someone into a monster that's going through some sort of health crisis and stuff like that. So he's getting the twist on what monsters are in the present sense and making them more modern. I dig that. I like that. I think Leigh Whannell has a great vision. I just wish there were some things that are kind of ridiculous, like, you know, climbing on top of a plastic building or encompass structure for safety when it's like it's plastic. Pretty sure you can, anything sharp can penetrate that, but okay, sure, I'm gonna go along with it. Going to a house that's supposed to be with someone that's been declared dead, yet it looks like it has less dust in my apartment. And also walking into a freezer with huge pounds of meat, again, with a house that someone's been declared dead and the electricity has been off. You don't need to have wolf senses to smell that. I could smell that in the theater, and I was like, no.
Well,
but
I have explanations for all of that, whether or not it's real. The movie doesn't answer it, and I think that's one of the parts that I think could have been touched up a little bit. But we'll get into that. But remind me to come back to that, the jerky and all that business. And I think that was a greenhouse or of some kind. It looked like
it was
a
meant to
greenhouse.
be like a greenhouse. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which that's fine. Just climbing on top of it and thinking we'll be safe.
Well, I think that's. I understand that too, and I'll pull over for a second there. One, from what I recall, I saw this a few days ago. There was a bit of clearance between the ground and the top of that structure. It was pretty tall. I don't think they were counting on the wolf creature that was attacking them having the ability to jump that high with its long claws. And I think they were more counting on the beams and being able to hang out there and like wait it out. Maybe it'll run away or get scared away. Plus they were panicked, and the house was very far away, and they had established that this thing can run really quickly. So it's like, well, we could get overtaken within a minute, or maybe we'll have 5 minutes hanging out on these beams. I don't know. But we'll get into all of that. So, yeah, sorry, I'm jumping in. Finish your thought, please.
No, but even though the couple that it has, you know, they're going through a trouble, there's not a lot of chemistry between them, which I think worked with the film. They're not supposed to have a lot of chemistry. I think the chemistry between Christopher Abbott and the actress that played his daughter Ginger, I thought their scenes were fantastic. I did like the practical effects. I'll always praise a film for doing practical effects. I liked some different aspects of the wolf, you know, turning into the wolf and stuff like that. There are definitely some scenes that were gross. I knew some people, or I didn't know some people, but there's some theater goers next to me that were definitely freaked out and scared. So it did its job there. Personally, I was not. It's one of those things I feel like this year, you know, films that are horror that aren't really scaring me and stuff like that. I mean, I know I watch them 24/7. At the same time, they could be a little, I did think some scenes were gross, which good for them. Again, I see what they're going with the body horror and Cronenberg and stuff like that. But like I said, it was fine. I'm not going to dog it. I don't think it's not going to be in my worst list. I went in with no expectations other than knowing that Leigh Whannell directed it. So I'm always going to give a thumbs up for that. Christopher Abbott was in it, and Julia Garner. Aces and aces. That's the only thing I knew about it. And it was fine. You know, I know it's horror. There's going to be like, it's the scariest thing since The Exorcist. Like, this is the biggest pile of dog shit. To me, I'm in the middle. It's like I give it a 6. It's, you know, I was better. And
before you said that, I was thinking you're probably going to give this a 6 because you're not in love with it, but it's not, you know, below average, as you said. Yeah. But yeah. Oh, hold on a second. We got a comment from someone who should be here. David Fowley, nice wall crawler moment. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, Mark. I saw you get physically wounded when Katie mentioned, some people are saying it's going to say it's the scariest movie since The Exorcist. I always hate it when I hear that because I'm like, wow. But all right, give us your take, your high level take on the Wolfman.
I hate those hyperboles because it's obviously, especially if it's people with the early screenings, fishing for that pull quote. It was like when the Blair Witch remake came out and someone did the huge quote, and of course it got pulled, but at the same time, I'm like, which movie did you watch?
I will not mention who that person was. I think we're talking about the same person because I know people who know that person, and I was like, yikes, that's not going to last.
I was like, mad props. I mean, everybody sees something different. That's what's magic about cinema. When I talked to Raphael, we had that discussion. So as far as Wolfman goes, I didn't have expectations. In fact, I had low expectations, especially after you saw the supposed version of the Wolfman that showed up at one of the Halloween events during October. The image made the rounds, and it looked like a Temu version of a Deadite. And you're just like that's the design. So I'm gonna say now, when we finally get to see Wolfman, yeah, he looked good. I liked the design. I liked the practical effects in here. My rating's a little bit lower than Katie's, but it's pretty much middle of the road.
Okay.
There were some elements that I enjoyed. I enjoyed some of the horror elements in that. There were just a lot of decisions made in here that I think were not necessarily Whannell's choice. I have a feeling others were involved. I think there's a little bit more to this film because for me, you're going to have to buy into the family dynamic. And for me, I never did. So that removed some of the tension for me when we get later in the film and there's peril and everything. And especially with choices further down the road, no spoilers yet, that are made by certain characters. For me, I didn't really feel it with this family. Between the dad and the little girl, I did feel some, but then when we get to the house, that kind of goes away because they dump you right into more Wolfman stuff and him turning and that, and he has a little less interaction for obvious reasons. They're trying to keep him away. No, it has moments, it has ideas, but as we mentioned, the greenhouse scene, that one, he was on their heels until he wasn't, and this isn't the only film that has done that, but in here, he's supposed to be fast, but they had time to get the ladder and pull the ladder up, and he wasn't that far away, at least from the cinematography, the way it was shot, it did not look like he was that far away. So I'm like, okay, I can see the mom and the daughter getting on top of the greenhouse, but I didn't think he was moving fast enough because he was also, fighting he's sick with his wolf infection. I didn't think he was going to get up there, and I figured they get into a little brawl, but he gets up there in enough time as well as to pull the ladder. And that part with me was,
well, I mean, they'd established by then that he was already assuming a lot of the powers of this creature. I mean, they established that in movie time earlier when he's walking up to the house because he hears this like pounding, scratching sound. Right. A spider in the closet. So
which is a huge spider I don't remember ever seeing in Oregon at all. But no, I was middle of the road on this. I mean, I liked some of the horror elements parts. I liked we got some wolf on wolf action. I didn't have any emotional weight with where the scene, especially, you're supposed to have emotional weight at the end. I didn't feel that at all. I did like how it bookended from the beginning. I really enjoyed the part in the beginning where it was our young, the young guy, him as a kid with his dad, that whole sequence. I enjoyed that sequence quite a bit. Yeah. I'm like, okay. And then we get into the urban section where we're introduced to our family, and it kind of dwindled, and it dwindled further because, you know, and I'm not exactly sure what it was with them. I just wasn't feeling it. I don't know if it was just not so much chemistry, if maybe they were too dysfunctional for me
Well,
to, you know.
I can, I get what you're saying, and I agree with it, but the family dynamic in this movie, or the lack of a dynamic, is what really sold me on Wolfman. And I think one of the things you might be coming up against is something that I think the next time I watch this movie, and I will watch it again, although I'm probably going to skip the very end because there's a musical choice that we'll get to. Don't let me forget the final shot. But the idea of this family, this guy, he's a writer, but he hasn't worked in a while, so he's basically the house dad. He's taking care of the daughter, doing all the shopping and the house cleaning stuff. And then mom she's a writer for like the New York Times or something like that. She's a full-blown, very successful journalist. They don't see each other a lot. They don't communicate. And Blake, who's our Chris Abbott character, he gets a letter basically saying that his father has passed away, and he's inherited the house. Well, he's got to go clean out the house and maybe get it ready for sale or something like that. But he's like, well, let's get out of New York. Let's go to the the woods of Oregon for the summer. It'll be a good retreat, honey. You can write from anywhere. Don't worry about your job. Yada yada yada. So they go off onto this kind of like idyllic summer vacation where they're going to try and rebuild their family because it's clearly broken. But the whole movie, aside from the kind of preamble that takes place decades earlier, is pretty much a one night of terror scenario. So they never get to the part where they're going to make things better. They start off where the main couple, is very distant from each other, but they recognize there's a problem and they want to work on it. But they get to this place and everything goes south immediately. And all of a sudden, dad's scratched by a werewolf and he's turning into a monster. So the weight of the film becomes all about the metaphor of the wolf and intergenerational, trauma and conflict.
Yeah.
As far as the tension, the horror, it does end up playing out like we've seen in a lot of cases. And I was reminded of a film that I really didn't care for. I like Wolfman a lot better than Heretic. But the thing with Heretic was, I thought it was much more interesting when it was a conversation between these three people about faith, and it became, well, now we're going to throw everyone into this creepy basement and they have to like fight to survive. I'm like, yeah, okay. Let's get back to the talking parts. Here was pretty much the same thing. But yeah, as far as like not feeling that family connection, Mark, I don't know if you were supposed to. It's a very tricky thing for a filmmaker to say, we're going to have characters who are kind of cold and disconnected and trying to feel something for each other. And me as a filmmaker, I'm going to make the audience feel something for them. That was one of the reasons I hate Lost in Translation.
and I get that, but then don't direct certain scenes as if they're supposed to have more emotional.
Like what? Give me an example here.
Well, the ending, where we got the spoilers on, the ending, for crying out, they make it so like, oh, am I going to shoot him or not? And then he shows up and then she shoots him, and the way they do the music and the direction and everything, you have this feeling like this is supposed to be some kind of heavy decision for her. And I'm like, shit, she should have blown him away through the door the way she felt about him for most of the film. I never felt.
No, I mean, she never hated him.
No, but at the same time, they were so distant. Here he was a wolf, and if they want to change the dynamic to turn her from separated from her daughter to becoming Mama Bear, I needed a little more something. I don't know what with them, but there was just something lacking with this family for me, to where they're in dire, straits or whatnot. And I thought the Wolfman and the action was cool, but I didn't feel really for any of them except maybe the little girl for being caught up in all of this. But as far as the adults go, okay, and that's where it kind of lost me. Again, I liked some of the horror elements. I liked the settings. I liked some of the decisions they made, but some of the other decisions they made when you get to the character moments, I'm just like, it felt like something was lacking there for me. So when I got to it at the end, I was just like, eh.
No, I get it, but I had a completely different interpretation of it. I think that the character stuff was the strongest element of the movie, and I think that between Blake and Charlotte, the distance is there. You can tell that they really did love each other at one point, but something has gone wrong in their marriage that they need to fix. So at the end, when she's struggling, do I shoot him? Do I not? I mean, it's the same. We talked about Whannell being influenced by Cronenberg's The Fly. When Gina Davis has to shoot Brundlefly at the end, that thing has melted the legs of the scientist. It has caused all sorts of mayhem, and it is clear that it is losing its humanity by the second. So even when she has to help it blow its own head off, she is conflicted about it. She's crying, she's upset because they were also lovers, and that thing that she did love is slipping away. And I feel that's the same thing that we're getting here. She doesn't turn into like the gun-toting badass like at the end of A Quiet Place or something like that. It is a struggle, and when the three of them are together at the end, on the forest floor where Dad is slipping away because he's dying essentially, that's the moment of kind of reconciliation I think that they had wanted to get to, where they were all feeling something for each other, which they hadn't clearly felt in years. Even the scenes towards the beginning where it's the dad and the daughter, they have affection towards each other, but there is something off about that relationship too that I think needed to be repaired but never had the time to. So and I think that also goes back to that prologue, which is an extended prologue. It goes on for a while, and at one point I'm like, why are we spending so much time here? Is this the werewolf origin story? And it's not, but it's setting up the problems that are going to echo 30 years into the future between Blake and his family, because something has happened to his mother. We don't really, I don't think we find out what happened, but mom's not in the picture. We kind of assume maybe she's dead. Dad is played by Sam Jaeger, who I think the last time I saw him anything was Parenthood on TV years ago, and he was that was an excellent series, but he's got a strained relationship with his son because he's very much a survivalist and outdoorsy guy. He's pretty much turned this farmhouse into a compound, which we'll get to later with the whole beef jerky thing. But his son wants to kind of please his father, but Dad's kind of like a militant sort of hard ass. But he never had that influence of the mother. And so when we go to the modern day story in New York, Blake has become that mother for his daughter, that kind of nurturing figure, whereas the mom, Charlotte, is more of the distant, she's not as militant, but she is kind of hard. She's taking a business call when she comes into the apartment for dinner, and he's like, can you not do that? And she's like completely brushing him off and like, I'm going to do this because this is my job and I've got to provide, kind of thing. So there is those weird dynamics that play out, I think, throughout the movie that never quite get resolved, and that's part of the tragedy of it. And it's a very hard thing to pull off. And in the case with you, Mark, I can understand why that wasn't successful, and that might be what a lot of people are responding to, because this movie is not doing very well critically or in terms of fan opinion.
And the thing is, sorry, I didn't mean to just jump in, but the thing with it is with Wolfman, I think some people were just going in. I figured it was going to be different because I enjoyed The Invisible Man. I liked the take on The Invisible Man. I liked those characters better than I did in Wolfman. I thought they were just handled a little better. And as far as, the Brundlefly thing goes, we got to spend at least a little bit more time with Gina Davis's character and Brundle, as he was going, it went more time. It kind of goes what Katie was saying. I get wanting to jump you into the wolf stuff and get you right to the thriller stuff and everything, but at the same time, I needed at least one more beat or something with this family, I think, that would have probably hooked me. Maybe in between, because you mentioned New York. When Katie and I talked about it, she mentions it's San Francisco. We're trying to figure out. San Francisco?
I thought it was. I think
I don't know. They don't.
No, that's the thing. I originally thought it was New York, and then I read somewhere that they're in San Francisco. I'm like, is it? It's like, I'm not paying attention. But like, really? I'm like,
It's the same problem we had the other night, Mark, on your show. We were talking about Little Shop of Horrors, how we thought that was New York, but it was supposed to be like Skid Row in LA or something.
Yeah, it was.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I thought that was New York.
It's supposed to be LA, apparently.
Look, we're film critics. We're not geographers.
No, we're not geographers. No, but I mean, in any case, it's one of those where I could have used one more character beat with the family on their trip, possibly them pulling over to the side of the road for dinner and having maybe a little scene yet where they, she still can't quite put down the phone or something. I needed something a little bit more. I think I needed a few more.
A repeat of the scene we already got.
Well, no, but seeing her try, that's the thing is you don't. It's I don't know. There was something
on the trip though. I mean, that's
a little quick, but I mean, considering how hard she was with everything else, I'm like, oh, okay. That's why I figured couldn't have been New York, because man, that's a trip to drive across with a big butt truck. To give that up, especially with how hard-nosed she was with the article and everything. But it could have been. But in any case, like we said, we're not geographers. But I don't know. I guess just for me, for it to be above, say, a straight kind of middle horror film, which it ended up coming off for me. I know my oldest did not like this film at all. I think I needed just a little bit more with the characters before we got into the wolf stuff. Because we had that with, as you mentioned, the extended prologue in that. I was more into that relationship and seeing where that was going and feeling those characters more than I did with the family. The family almost felt like your college kids in a standard horror film where they come to the home and suddenly they're being terrorized by a wolf and you don't really feel anything for them. At least this one had a higher body count than Leigh's last film. So there you go. So that's good at least.
Which one was his last film?
Well, I think he wrote it, but Insidious, The Red Door or whatever it was, the one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there was nobody. So at least we get that, in here. And I'm going to say as well that, and I forgot her name again, Claire or
Charlotte. I think.
Charlotte, thank you. She is smart. Yep. She's smarter than most horror characters. She makes a number of very intelligent decisions that I did not expect. A number of choices that I really appreciated. That
although I want to jump in before I forget this, and then Katie, we'll get back to you. Sorry, we've been going at it.
Wolf. No, I'm just kidding.
I want to pull over to look at David's comment too, because he has another bit here. But as far as Charlotte being smart, yes, maybe a little bit too smart in one instance, because the scene where they're driving the U-Haul truck, or it's some other movie company, but there was an Easter egg on that truck. It was like moving people since 1941 or so, which is the year that the Universal Wolfman came out. But they pick up this guy who he's hanging out in a deer blind outside his property. It's getting to be nighttime. All the trails in the woods look the same, so they think that they're at the dad's house, but it turns out it's the neighbor's house. So this guy says, "Yeah, I can show you where to go." So gets in the truck and he's got his rifle with him, and Charlotte's kind of freaked out by it, and she kind of has that like, "Oh, I don't know, I don't like being around guns" thing. And I'm like, well, yeah, that kind of checks out. But then later, she's awfully handy with that rifle. She's loading it, she's cocking it. Like I've watched a lot of movies. You hand me one of those things. I don't know if I could even do the thing where you crack the top down. I know everybody who's a gun nut who's watching this is going to yell at me. But it just didn't. I was like, well, where did that come from? They needed to choose one or the other.
Well, I think she was more scared of Derek himself and not the gun. I don't think he really. The gun probably added to it, but it's the fact that you have Deliverance guy saying, "Yeah, I'll show you where to go," and she's from wherever. She just was hesitant being out in the country in general. So, I think she was just hesitant of him even before the gun. She just here's this guy who's saying, "Yeah, I could show you," and her husband barely recognizes him. So it was more of, I got the impression more of, yeah, we just picked up this guy in the woods, in the backwoods, who said, sure, I know where we're going to go.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is if they had just found him wandering through the woods, I could understand that. But they were clearly on his property, and he's a hunter, and he's got, like, it's not like he's, hey, look at my giant Bowie knife, like he's the hitchhiker in Texas Chainsaw. There's just something a bit off about that initial interaction that just seems so kind of cliche. You've got the coastal elite, whichever, San Francisco, New York, journalists are like, oh, I don't even want to look at guns, they're so scary. And then next thing you know, she's a gun-toting mama.
I think she was just scared of him, not necessarily the gun. It didn't really matter with the gun.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is like and again, it goes back to what I was just talking about. There was nothing particularly creepy about him. I mean, he was a little bit awkward, but he wasn't saying anything like creepy, like, oh, you never know what's going to be out here at night, like me. But all right, sorry, Katie, jump in.
No, I think Derek kind of has that thing that, yes, with all horror films, like, oh great, it's going to be this guy, he's going to slaughter them all, and then he ends up turning into Bill Skarsgård in Barbarian, where it's like, no, he's fine, he's just a guy. My thing with Charlotte is that I thought it was very interesting when they went to the barn, that she immediately knew that there was a bar behind the barn, considering, to close the door, considering she's never been in that barn before. And
but she might have seen Friday the 13th Part 3.
Well, and she did turn around. She did turn around. She probably turned around. I took that as she turned around to possibly figure out some way to bar the door, and she saw the bar and brought it down. I mean, she's, it's one of those where it's a quick look and glance, and you can pretty well put two and two together. So as far as that goes, I would say, I'm giving the benefit of the doubt that when she turned around, she saw the bar and she goes, oh, this is how this works. So
yeah.
It reminded me of that. It reminded me of a song, Just One Look, and I saw the bar. Sorry. Go ahead, Katie.
Well, that, and that she knew how to, throw down a bear trap. So obviously, we don't know Charlotte's background. We don't know where girlfriend's been. We don't know. It's like, look, she may have come from the country, doing hunting with her grandma, grandpa, mom and dad, who knows, cousins and all that, and then went to the city and threw it all behind. So, she's got some things going on. I do like that with Blake and his daughter and seeing Blake and his dad, it's like the harshness that Blake's dad had with him, but as it's trying to be, look, everything here is beautiful, but it can also be dangerous. And then when Blake's talking to his daughter, it's like, as parents, we try and protect our children from things that can scar them, and then we end up being the things that scar them. Yes. Which is a very deep thing to say to an 8-year-old. I thought, but I love the interaction with her. One thing I do agree with Mark is that at the end, when you get to that pivotal moment, I think the little girl that played Ginger is great, but I really feel like it should have been more emotional going on, even with Julia Garner too, because it's like, I think if that had been heightened, and if we're thinking back that this is supposed to be, with the inspiration being The Fly, Gina Davis killed that, and she's like tears in her eyes. I think that would have really cemented it more for me. Okay. But I don't know, there's different things. I felt like there's more than one wolf that I don't really think was I don't know. I feel like when they go off the road, there's a wolf there that has no clothes and all that stuff. And then when you see, we're talking spoilers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you see like the actual, like Blake's dad wolf, I swear he's wearing a plaid shirt and stuff. So it's like he's wearing clothes. So unless I'm mistaken, which I could be, because again, it's been about a week since I saw that. I thought the wolf in the road that made them go across, that wolf did not have clothes on. And then
no, he didn't.
Dad had a shirt. So
Yeah.
unless Blake's dad put on a shirt for company before he wanted to attack his family, I thought that was, it's like, okay, so is there more than one wolf? It's like, so
Yeah,
are they still in
there is.
danger?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is, and it's something I hadn't really thought about until you mentioned it. But yeah, there was always, well, we come to find out that for a while there has been more than one werewolf in that woods,
Mhm.
because they talk about it was years earlier. There was the hitchhiker, the hiker who had gone up into those woods and disappeared, and the legend is that they'd seen him, as this wolf creature. There's like a Native American saying, it was, I can't remember the name, but it was like the man with the wolf face, or the something like
Yeah.
that, or the beast's face. So when we find out later, because the entire time I think we're meant to assume that the family, Blake, Charlotte, and Ginger, had been attacked by the werewolf version of that hitchhiker that's been living in the woods. But come to find out, when we see I think it's like a Marine tattoo on the arm, that it was actually, they were fighting his Blake's dad. But they didn't establish. I was just kind of assuming, well, maybe Blake's dad has killed that other werewolf, or something. But when you mentioned that wolf man that shows up on the road naked, there probably are two werewolves living in this woods, and maybe they have different territories or something like that, because there is a bit of distance. We don't know exactly how far apart they are, but they could be very close to each other, just stalking different parts of the woods. Or they could just be setting it up for the sequel, Wolf Men. I do want to say
Wolf
the
person.
issue,
Let's make
wolf
it.
person.
Yeah.
There
Wolf,
you go. Yeah,
wolf people.
wolf people. But I do want to go back to something we talked about at the beginning, which is, or that I wanted to talk about, I was reminded about at the beginning, the issue with Blake's father. He gets the notice and the keys to the house that his dad is dead. Um, Now, we don't know exactly what happened, but he's got to go clear out the house. It's not until very late in the movie that we find out that he had gone into the woods and disappeared,
Yeah.
much like the hitchhiker. I think we had always just assumed that he had a heart attack, or he just died or whatever. So when you talk about how they go to the house and there's not a whole lot of dust and everything, there's no sense of the time for how long he'd been missing. Blake did say something like, well, I knew this day was coming. So I don't know if he was talking about, because he was estranged from his dad, he was expecting someday he'd get the letter, or if he had known that his dad had gone missing, which I would find odd, because he didn't give any indication of, they finally found my dad. It's just like, well, I got this notice that he's dead. No one's surprised. So yeah, when they go into the house and they restart the generator and the place is pretty clean, it looked like there'd been some things had been cleaned up in the ensuing years, because the kind of bunker basement that he has, it's more sparse when Blake comes across it.
Mhm.
But also, as far as the storage locker with the meat hanging up and all that, I don't know if that was, I'm not sure if that was a freezer or just some kind of a locker. I don't know how well you needed to preserve all of that. Again, I don't know anything about making jerky, so maybe it was fine. I did think it was rather gross that he like kind of peeled it off and ate it. But again, like, that's something they probably did, he did as a kid. So he's like, yeah, he knew what he was doing.
Well,
I love what you're, real quick, Mark, I love what you're saying, Katie, about we don't know anything about Charlotte. And it occurs to me, you may be right. She might have been a country girl who went to the city to, leave things behind, much like Blake did. And maybe that's what attracted them to each other.
Mhm.
But she just kind of like put the country on the shelf, where he is never really kind of left it because of the trauma. And what I loved about this movie is they could have gone the route where Blake was an abused child. Dad was like a real cold, hard ass who beat him up or whatever. That was not the case. He was hard on him because he had this kind of survivalist thing. But I think part of that could be that he didn't want, maybe he lost the mom and felt helpless to do something about that. And so it's like, this world can take things from you in an instant. To me, that says more about, that story, what happened there, than any, flashback, when a flashback would have helped.
Well, and one of the things, like, and maybe it's the Gen Xer in me also, it's like, look, when the dad was yelling at Blake as a child, it's like, yeah, see those mushrooms that it looked like you're about to eat that will kill you? This is why I am yelling at you. And
Yeah.
like when Blake was yelling at Ginger, see when I told you to get off the pylons and then you fall in the street? This is why I am yelling at you. It's not like it's frivolous, like it's just verbal abuse and all that stuff, or let's use our words. It's like the child was about to get run over, like fall in the street and could have died. They need to be mad.
Well, and that's
Like,
that's another. Well, that's another sort of undercurrent that I don't think has time to be explored. I am sure that if they had had that full summer of the family talking about their issues, that would have come up. Because you're right, that is a very 90s thing. Because I think the flashbacks were like 1995 or thereabouts.
98.
So was it 98? Okay. So that whole thing about the harsh parenting and the yelling, there are very different schools of thought today about how you talk to children, even if you're supposed to reprimand them, and sort of like gentle parenting and all that. So I feel like that was something that Blake was also fighting against.
Yeah.
Like when he would have these outbursts at either Ginger or his wife, and he'd feel bad about it. Like, oh, I'm not supposed to feel that. I'm not supposed to express myself that way, because that's, that's not, you used the term PC a few minutes ago. I think that's sort of another layer that didn't get a chance to be explored, and it's frustrating, I think. But that's also, I think, what Whannell was going for, which is that overall theme of like, yeah, your life can be thrust into chaos at any moment, and you got to be ready for it. You don't get time for the beautiful summer of rebuilding your family when dad has just been attacked by a monster and now he's attacking you. Mark, the floor is yours, sir.
For what? No, you guys.
No, you look like I know. I've been again. I'm trying to cut down on the
No
monologuing,
means.
but I'm terrible at it. Go ahead.
No, by all means, you two go right along. That's fine. I had different experiences with my scolding. So the scolding that he gave his kids is not the type of scolding I normally got. So even if he was,
I feel like we could swap some stories.
Or the scolding that even the scolding I gave my kids, it was similar to that, but it was never of, oh, I have to use my nice words with my kids if I had to yell at them. So I guess I just never felt that way as a parent. But I was not I'm not the whole parent too that says those are poisonous mushrooms. Go ahead, eat them, see what happens. That would be my parents. That's Gen X there. That Gen X isn't oh, let's choose our words. Gen X is, yeah, go ahead, eat that mushroom, see what happens.
Wolf them down, man.
You're the FAFO generation, like fuck around and find out. It's like, that's what we are.
Yeah, that bug. Oh, is it poisonous? Go ahead, touch it. Go ahead.
Does that look good? Yeah.
Good.
Why don't you see what happened?
Katie, you just reminded me of another relic from my childhood. FAO Schwartz, the toy store, the upscale toy store.
Go.
They should have FAFO Schwartz.
That would be amazing. Like
Dangerous
bears
toys
that just have like fingers points, like glares. All these toys, like what?
The glare bears. There you go.
The glare bears.
There you go.
Yeah, and then like dolls that have strings. You just go what?
Yeah.
What? Oh, okay.
And they all have RBF. So
resting bear face. Yes.
There you go.
No. So sorry, I cut you off.
No, it's just you all make great points, and I'm very happy that you guys enjoyed it a little more than I did. I didn't hate it. Again, I didn't hate it. I guess for me, what we got for Invisible Man, I didn't quite have expectations, but I was maybe leaning towards, okay, give me something really different here. And he does with the Wolfman, but he also doesn't. And I'm like, whereas Invisible Man, I felt they more committed to doing something different with the monster altogether. In this one, it felt a little bit more in between. And I understand it's a werewolf, but at the same time, I guess for me, when I was watching it, as it went along, it started to fall more and more into just your basic werewolf story by the end of it. Whereas with the Invisible Man, I didn't have that. It kind of went the opposite. It was like, oh, we're doing it, and then you started learning more, and you're like, oh no, we're doing it this way. Oh, this is what's going on. Whereas with this one, it almost was kind of the opposite. It's like, oh wait, no, now we have wolf vision. Okay, now he can hear but he can't quite heal, but he's not fully turned, but then he is, and now he's kind of like Brundlefly's phase 2 wolf version. You know, I mean, for me, and I let Katie know, my favorite sequence is the sequence with the truck. I like
that was great.
I really enjoyed the way that was directed, edited, acted, that whole sequence. But then we followed up with the plastic greenhouse, and then I'm just like, oh, come on, man.
Well, and see, you know how I was talking about, like, we don't know Charlotte's backstory. Girlfriend, if she knows how to do that with a truck, I'm saying, like, she could be a big city kitty. I'm not, you know, hey, I know I came from a little bit more south and stuff like that. I've been on farms. I've, you know, been in the back of trucks and all that junk. She knew her way around, you know, not hot wiring a truck, but like getting it. And all, I feel like, yeah, there's a little bit more backstory in Charlotte that, we don't see, and we don't need to. It's like, she can have many layers, you know, all that girl boss, like coming up from whatever she did. But that scene with the truck is one of those scenes that it's like, okay, I see you, girl. Like you got some stories. I wanna know when you drank moonshine for the first time. It's like I think you did some Mad Dog 2020 in college. Like I see you. Oof. Yeah, I get it. But yeah, I like Charlotte. And I liked how they made her, especially like when she saw what was happening with her husband and he got in her face, that she did the dominant thing. Because when you're with an animal, the fact that she like didn't cower down and she showed her strength to show who was boss, like that's a good move. I was annoyed though. It is one of those things. And again, I just wish this was lengthened. It with that short amount of time in the night, the fact that they just kept trying to like fall asleep and stuff with everything that was going on, that's one of the things that really annoys me. It's like, yes, you know what? We just saw someone get dragged out of a truck and definitely eviscerated and pulled apart. You know what? Now's the time to take a nap. I think maybe we can, like, you've got so much adrenaline going. I don't see that could happen. But maybe figure out how the heck you're going to get out of there and then get someone, you know, relax so that you can rest. Because I felt like there were a number of times where the child kept sleeping, Charlotte was going to sleep and stuff like that. I'm like, this is the most unbelievable part of the whole film for me.
I would have to go and watch it again, but my recollection of it is it was definitely early in the film when they got back to the house after being attacked. They were trying to, my sense was they were trying to get Ginger to go to sleep because, you know, they wanted the adults to figure stuff out. I feel like Charlotte was going to go to sleep because she was exhausted. I mean, after everything that they'd been through, they'd been driving, let's just say they were driving cross country all day, and then this happens, and then they're full of, you know, they've just been running for their lives. I can very much see them thinking, even if it's on a subconscious level, we're not going to walk out of here tonight. We don't have any working vehicles. So if we can pass out and kind of ride this out until morning, we can kind of regroup and figure out what's going on. Again, there's a whole bunch of stuff that isn't really talked about in the movie that we kind of have to assume. And that might be a shortcoming of the screenplay, or it could be Whannell, again, trying to place us in a realistic scenario. But what was I going to say? I completely lost it. I had a point, and I don't know what it is. I do want to pull over because David Fowley has a number of comments, but the most recent one, there were audible laughs when they went back to the moving truck location and the lights were still on. Yes. I don't know why that's funny, because if the lights were on when the accident happened, I mean, you can leave the lights on your car all night, and as long as there's juice in the battery, they're going to still be on. They were only separated from that truck by a few hours. I don't get it. Help me out here. Why is that funny?
I thought they turned the truck off.
I don't know. I missed that detail.
I mean, it's small, and it's just because, you know, as soon as you're in a wreck, you're always supposed to like turn it off in case it catches fire and all that. And maybe it could, I mean, it would have been especially if they knew there was some sort of animal honking the horn right away, would have usually scared it off. That could have been something they could have done. But again, they're in a major wreck, so not everyone's, synapses are going off correctly. So yeah, it's not like 101 how to survive a moving van wreck with some guy you haven't seen in 30 years.
That's the title of Leigh Whannell's next picture.
Yes.
No, actually, I do remember what I was going to say. And Katie, it was, I can't believe I didn't bring this up the entire conversation, because one of the things that impressed me the most about this movie, you talked about Charlotte doing the dominance thing with the wolf man as sort of a protective measure. What I thought was great, and I think kind of underscored the thesis and the tragedy of this movie, it's all about communication. Not being able to communicate what you want to say, the way you want to say it, the way the other person wants to receive it. When Blake, who really wants nothing more than his family to reconnect, a lot of because of his baggage and what that's done to their dynamic, he's the one who's scratched by the wolf and transforming into this creature. And as he deteriorates, it starts with pretty much that whole spider scene. Now, Mark, it was a gigantic spider. And I was looking at is this just the angle, or is this thing, did they secretly go to Australia? I don't know.
I think they went to Australia.
This thing was, well, I think Leigh Whannell might be Australian, but
yeah.
Or New Zealand, something like that.
Yeah, shameless plug. I will be dropping down below the interview I did with Leigh Whannell for Upgrade from a few years ago. Very lovely man. Were you part of that junket too? In the in the LA
in that little thing. Yeah.
There you go. Still bummed I didn't have the courage to ask him for a signed poster, because he was signing posters there. But anyway, okay, Leigh Whannell. The point. Blake unable to communicate with his family.
Yes.
He starts turning into a very canine type creature, and there's a great device. I think they use it maybe one too many times, because I got it what they're doing, but you would go from a regularly lit scene, which is very dark in the house because they have very limited electricity, and you'd have Charlotte and Ginger trying to communicate with Blake, and the camera would kind of pan around them, and as it got over to Blake's perspective, everything would kind of turn kind of bright and shimmery blue, very surreal, and the audio would get completely distorted, and you would understand maybe one word, and then there'd be another word that kind of sounds familiar, but you can't make it out because everything else becomes garbled from Blake's point of view. And you're like, my God, this is what they're trying to replicate, dog hearing, to the point where if you've got a dog, you think they understand your words, but it's more about the inflection, or maybe it's something that's repeated a lot, like love, I love you, Dad, or, fetch, shut up, something like that. And so I really liked the fact that we could see what was going on inside Blake's head, and that getting worse and worse. It was almost like what would have been cool to see inside Brundlefly, although that would have been probably truly nightmarish. But it was a great support, again, I think, of the thesis. Now, this movie did come out in January. And I think that's a lot of people are dogpiling that. What do you expect, the January horror movie? Well, Invisible Man came out the end of February in 2020. So that was another one of those winter horror movies everyone likes to dog on. I think this might have been Blumhouse's attempt at sort of counter-programming, because it's not a slasher. It's not like every other monster movie you've seen. It is something different. I think it might have done better maybe in as an August thing. Because it's not quite award season by any stretch, but it's not a summer blockbuster, and it's just before Halloween. I think this might have been, I don't know if it was late or if they just needed a slot to fill, but I think the release it kind of hurt this movie.
I like how you said dogpiling.
Oh.
Did you not even realize that?
You didn't even realize he punned.
You didn't even realize that? That's what I was like.
You punned.
No, I didn't realize.
Because I know a lot of people are calling it the Wolf Man and just wolf. Ooh, no. I'm like, I don't agree with that. I do think, when you put it in January, there's always going to be that negative that it's all right, well, this is going to be a stinker. But early release film Get Out came out in February. The year it came out.
Megan came out in January.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Although
So,
you reminded me, Mark, that they're going to make Megan 3 and or Megan 2. I'm waiting for Megan 3 because it's just going to be the 3 and damn it.
but I do think, yeah, I'm not sure they knew what to do with the film. And as Mark said, that whole thing with Universal Horror Nights and all that stuff, when they had the guy dressed up with the mat, I think that really put like some negative thoughts in people's minds. It's all about expectation, and especially with horror, if people are expecting it to be this and then it's not what they have put in their minds what it's going to be, it's going to get just ridiculed forever. And the divisiveness in the horror community just continues to grow. But this was not bad. It wasn't a horrible film. It just I just definitely feel like it could have been better. I feel like they really cut out some certain things, and just if they would have elongated that to just make it more tense, to show more of the transformation. And I, like you said, I really liked that whole thing, seeing it from, like, especially in the barn, seeing like when Charlotte and Ginger are in the barn, it's so dark, they don't know what's going on, but then you, like as you said, they pan around to Blake, and you're seeing it from his perspective, and it's like bright as day. He can see everything, but his wife and daughter, it's like their faces are so contorted that it's like, I mean, at that point, he, can't tell who they are and all that. But I really liked that. I know, Mark, that was not your favorite part.
Well, I also like that when we do see Charlotte and Ginger kind of huddled in the corner from Blake's perspective, the next shot is we go back to, I think it's just behind Blake and Charlotte, where they're in the barn, and then there's like this giant inky black void of them looking into the darkness of the barn. And we realize that from that vantage point, like if there was a spotlight, they would have seen like the full Blake Wolf standing right there. But because it's so dark, they can't see what's literally right in front of them. I thought it was super creepy and also cool, because I hadn't quite expected that. I mean, that's the thing. I think I will watch this movie again, partially because I wasn't expecting it to go the places that it went. I was kind of expecting a more traditional slashery kind of monster film. And also, I think the low expectations of what I thought was not a great trailer, and also the negative hype kind of going into it with that the werewolf costume and all that business. There is so much baggage going into this. I feel like I need to give it some time and watch it again and see, are the problems that I have with it really that big? Are the highs that I'm experiencing, were they that significant because I wasn't expecting much? Or, as with the two of you are saying, is this more a 4 or a 6, somewhere in there? And that's fun. That's the art of watching and appreciating movies. Before we wrap up, because it is getting late, we're going to go back to the comments of Mr. David Fowley. So he should be on the panel, but I'm getting over a rough bout of COVID. Now, David, this poses a problem because, and we'll talk offline, but we're going to be talking about next week's movie is Flight Risk. And there's a risk that we might not be able to talk about it because David and I are supposed to go see this movie together. So we'll talk later. But stay tuned, everybody. Some real drama here on the channel.
Speaking of COVID, though, that was one of the things when I got out of the theater.
You got
and
COVID?
I mentioned I did.
Oh.
I mentioned, the whole thing about Charlotte not being able to smell that rancid meat that's been in that freezer without electricity forever. I was like, I even wrote down, it's like, does she have long COVID? Because how in the hell could she not smell that? And she doesn't have the wolf senses. And the thing is, then when I was talking to some other press members, I'm like, yeah, come on. It's like, and they're like, maybe she's got long COVID. I don't know. I'm like, that's what I said.
Well, or she could just be a character in a horror movie, because the older I get, that's the thing that bugs the crap out of me, is when you've got the person who's walking into the murder house, or the zombie movie, it's always like you open the door and like, oh my God, there's zombies. You would have smelled them 100 yards away.
I
But,
know
you
it's the 5 senses rule. If they break the 5 senses, I'm going to have an issue with it.
Yeah, that's why a lot of horror movies are problematic as far as immersiveness. All right, so David also says, I can see maybe Blake visiting the farmhouse first. Maybe he goes missing too, but Charlotte agreeing to pick up and move just after one convo. Nope, I agree, but I also maintain that we don't know how much time has lapsed between that conversation and them actually going out there. So I believe the magic of editing may have prevented us from seeing some of those other conversations. And if someone has to say, well, we're tough people too, then maybe they're not so tough. Yes, I think that's the point, David. You got it exactly. Well, that was the joke. Because I didn't get a laugh in the theater from the truck lights being on. But yeah, when she said we're tough people too, that got a bit of a chuckle. So yeah, any kind of closing thoughts on Wolfman before we wrap it up?
It's better than most January films.
Okay, that could be a poll quote. I love it.
I know and that's actually what I said to marketing people. It's like, it's better than most January films I've seen. Yeah, right there, the blonde in front, glowing review.
I'm sure they'll take it at this point.
Yeah, that's going to be on the physical copy right now.
There you go. Yeah, that's on the reversible cover.
Yes,
That's what that is. Yeah.
All right, Mark, how about you?
It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
That's on the front, and then Katie's on the reverse cover. There you go.
It's again, being the horror fan in that, there were moments and there were a number of moments I was fine with. It was just, where it was coming from and who was involved. I think I was hoping for it to hit a little bit more, and looking at some of the editing choices and some of the other story elements, I really wonder if there was some interference involved in trimming this runtime down, possibly, and he may have had a little bit more, just a little bit, not a whole lot. I'm not asking for a whole lot.
Just a little bit.
I'm thinking maybe 5 minutes or something, just for a little bit of a transition, a little bit more of an idea of time being spent. I get once in the house, no problem. But like we said, we're not sure which city they came from, if it was from Oregon, which means 5 hours, or because they do mention being in a truck for 5 hours, or they flew from New York to Oregon and then we're in the truck for 5. It's hard to say, but there's a little bit disjointedness in the time frame of everything once we get away from the intro with younger Blake, and I think that throws you off a bit. But I mean, it's fine. It's a lot better than the Grudge remake that they came out in January, a year or two ago. That one was, oof.
That's
right.
a stinker.
It's that movie was so bad. I was like, did I see that? Yeah, and I think they did a show on it. And I completely forgot.
I mean, it's one of those things where if they're doing this, trying to be not so sly and setting up a Blumhouse universe rather than a dark universe of sorts, which it has been kind of alluded to a couple of times, that's something that they may want to do. I'd be interested in see where it's going and see where they go from here. Just for me, yeah, I didn't feel like I wasted my money, but at the same time, I was like, there was no real reason for me to see this in the theater.
See, what I love, Mark, is you actually do have 2 back-to-back pull quotes. I don't feel like I wasted my money, and there's no reason to see this in the theater.
And that's the thing. Like, I wasn't expecting more, but I wanted more. And yeah, and that's the thing. Like I've said, I just wish it just felt like it just needed just a little, like 15 more minutes or so. It doesn't need to be like 30. I feel like, and I keep comparing it to The Invisible Man, where I love The Invisible Man. I thought it was great. And I thought they did an amazing job with the interactions with everybody and family dynamics and stuff. But I felt like this, like Mark said, they definitely like maybe cut stuff out or something. And I just wish that had just been, if that had been elongated, I feel like it would have been a solid 8 for me. Right now, it's a 6. which isn't fine. 6s need love too. That's fine.
Katie, it's interesting you say that, and this will be kind of my final thought is, Invisible Man, I only saw it the one time, but it really made an impression on me. And I think Elizabeth Moss was really terrific in that. But I think the key difference between that and this movie is that was really, you spent a lot of time with that character and getting to know her and how all this stuff was affecting her, and the tertiary characters were tertiary characters. Here, you've got a setup for a bunch of interesting characters that you kind of want to figure out and spend time with and hope that they kind of pull through this thing. But then it's a different storytelling approach to the point like, no, we are not going to give them that chance, and you're going to watch this one night of terror. I was almost at the point where it's like, well, I don't really care if there's a werewolf in this movie. In fact, I just want to see how these folks interact with each other over the summer.
Yeah.
Or maybe you have the wolf menace kind of manifest throughout the summer as they're working things out. But then again, that's a completely different type of movie. We have to deal with the one we have on its own terms. And I think for what we have, you're bringing me back in terms of my estimation of this. I feel like I really enjoy this movie. I think I'll enjoy it again. But yeah, I kind of want more out of it, and that's fine too. But it's a little late, so I'm going to let everybody go after we do our little roundup here. I do appreciate. What you want to talk more? What do you think, Wolfie or Blake? Should I call you Blake? In joke, maybe was Ginger's name a reference to the other werewolf movie, Ginger Snaps? Anybody? Any takers?
I was wondering that myself. That's
Okay.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I kind of thought of that because you don't see a lot of gingers, and I love it. And then it's like, then I thought it was like, okay, let's think of some werewolf movies. Interesting.
Which I think that's great, because I feel like that's going to end up on trivia somewhere, like on IMDb, and people are going to be like, "What the hell is Ginger Snaps?" And they're going to discover another, solid and very different werewolf movie. Okay, so
opening doors.
That's what we do here.
That's what we do.
Although we're closing the doors now because we're ending the show. I can't do it because my mic's in the way. But anyway, I have been Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. We have Mark the Movie Man Krawcheck. Oh, there he is behind the doors of the Spoiler Room podcast, and Katie Glidewell, the blonde in front. And also, what I forgot, what's his name again, or hers?
This?
Yes.
Wolfie? I don't know. I'm not really.
Wolfie.
Yeah. Blake.
Every time I hear Wolfie, I think of
Terminator 2
with the call. Yeah. Damn it.
What's the name of the dog?
Wolfie. It's we're kindred spirits, Mark. All right, so thank you all for watching, for the folks who hung out with us live, and if you're catching this on the replay, what did you think of Wolfman or The Invisible Man or Upgrade or any of Leigh Whannell's films, including Saw? Why not? Drop a line in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And if you like this live stream, please like and subscribe to Kicking the Seat. We'd love to have you on board. And please support all of Earth's Mightiest Critics. Their information will be down below. And next week, we'll see if we're back here talking about Flight Risk, the new Mel Gibson movie starring Marky Mark's bald cap and Topher Grace, who was also in Heretic. This is like a resurgence of, I wonder what they're doing, actors. Until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much. Take care, and let's go out on a good howl, gang. Can we give a good howl? Ow! I don't even